This actually happened, and once you hear it, you won't forget it. Like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Bath, Michigan, 1927. A small farming community where everybody knew everybody, where neighbors waved from their porches and children walked to school without their parents worrying. The kind of town that exists in old photographs with wide open skies and church steeples and the kind of stillness that makes you believe the world is fundamentally safe. Andrew Kehoe lived there. He was intelligent, hardworking, the kind of man who paid attention to details and took pride in doing things correctly. His neighbors respected him, trusted him even, but quietly, in the way people whisper things they are not sure they should say out loud. They talked about the horse. How one afternoon Andrew Kehoe had beaten one of his horses to death in his barn, not out of necessity, not out of desperation, out of rage, because the animal had failed to meet his expectations. Nobody talked about it too loudly. Everyone filed it away in that part of their mind where uncomfortable things go when you do not know what to do with them. They should have listened to that feeling. His reputation for being careful with money earned him the position of treasurer on the Bath School Board. He was methodical, precise, the kind of man you trusted with numbers. But the other board members quickly discovered something else about him. He was impossible to work with. Rigid, controlling, the kind of man who took any disagreement as a personal attack and never forgot a slight, no matter how small. In 1926, his wife Nellie became seriously ill with tuberculosis. The medical bills piled up. The financial pressure on the household grew heavier with every passing month. Most people in that situation would look inward, would find ways to cut costs, would sell equipment or seek help from family. Andrew Kehoe looked outward. He decided the school superintendent was responsible for his financial troubles. The school taxes were too high. The system was bleeding him dry. Someone had to be held accountable. And in his mind, that someone was never going to be him. Around the same time, he ran for the position of town clerk, a small local position, the kind of thing most people wouldn't think twice about. He lost. To Andrew Kehoe, this was not just a lost election. This was the entire town of Bath telling him they did not want him, that they had looked at him and found him lacking. He began to change after that, not dramatically, not in a way anyone could easily name, but the people around him started noticing things he said, small comments that made them pause. He told a bus driver delivering his paycheck, "My boy, you want to take good care of that check. It is probably the last one you will ever get." He warned a teacher that if she wanted a picnic, she had better have it soon. People laughed nervously, assumed he was just being strange. Nobody asked what he meant. What nobody knew was what Andrew Kehoe was doing at night. For months, he had been using his position as the school handyman to access the Bath Consolidated School after hours. Quietly, methodically, the way he did everything. He was hiding explosives in the basement, not just a small amount, hundreds of pounds of pyrotol, a repurposed World War I incendiary explosive, packed carefully into the crawl spaces beneath the school where nearly 200 children sat in classrooms every single day. He had been planning this for a long time. While he smiled at neighbors, while he attended board meetings, while parents dropped their children off at school without a second thought, he was underneath that building hiding enough explosives to bring it to the ground. The morning of May 18, 1927 started like any other morning in Bath. Children packed their bags, parents made breakfast, teachers prepared their lessons. At his farm, Andrew Kehoe woke up early. He had things to do. First, he set fire to his farmhouse and all his outbuildings. Firebombs he had prepared in advance detonated across the property, sending flames into the early morning sky. Neighbors saw the smoke and called the fire department. As firefighters rushed toward his property, Andrew Kehoe was already driving away in his truck. A truck he had packed carefully the night before with dynamite and pyrotol. He stopped when he saw the firefighters heading toward his burning farm. He rolled down his window. "Boys," he said calmly, "you're my friends. You better get out of here. You better head down to the school." The firefighters didn't understand what he meant. They would in 15 minutes. At 8:45 in the morning, classes had just begun at the Bath Consolidated School. Children were settling into their seats. Teachers were calling roll. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary school morning filled the building. Then the alarm clock Andrew Kehoe had set weeks earlier went off in the basement. The north wing of the school disappeared. The explosion was heard miles away. Windows shattered across the town. The entire north wing collapsed instantly, burying children and teachers under tons of rubble. 38 people were killed in those first moments. Many of them were children. The survivors came pouring out of the wreckage. Some carried others. Some were too injured to move. Parents who had heard the explosion from their homes came running. Neighbors dropped everything and rushed to help. The town of Bath converged on that school to pull people out of the rubble with their bare hands. Half an hour later, as rescuers desperately dug through the collapsed building searching for survivors, a truck pulled up to the school. Andrew Kehoe sat behind the wheel. He watched the chaos he had created for a moment. The crying, the screaming, the people covered in dust pulling rubble away piece by piece looking for children. He saw the school superintendent in the crowd. He waved him over. When the superintendent approached the truck, Andrew Kehoe looked at him and confessed calmly to everything he had done. Then he said 4 words, "I'll take you with me." He fired his rifle into the back seat of his truck where he had packed the remaining explosives. The truck detonated. Andrew Kehoe, the superintendent, 5 other bystanders who had come to help, gone in an instant. When investigators went to examine what remained of Andrew Kehoe's farm, they found things that painted a portrait of a man who had been planning this for a very long time. Every tree on his property had been deliberately girdled, a process of cutting through the bark in a ring around the trunk to slowly kill the tree. He had done this to every single one. Every fence on the property had been cut. His horses had their legs wired together so they could not escape the fire. His wife Nellie was found in the wreckage. She had been beaten to death before the fire was set. Tied to the fence was a sign he had made himself with words stenciled carefully onto it. It read, "Criminals are made, not born." And in his barn, investigators found something that stopped them completely. Unused farm equipment. Equipment that, if he had simply sold it, would have been enough to cover his financial burdens entirely. The debt that he had blamed on the school superintendent. The debt that he had used to justify everything he had done. The money had been there the whole time. He just never wanted to solve the problem. He wanted someone to blame. 38 children and teachers died in the explosion. 58 more were injured. Andrew Kehoe killed his wife, his animals, his neighbors, and himself because he lost an election and couldn't pay his bills. Because he needed someone else to be responsible for his failures. Because in his mind, the entire world owed him something it never delivered. The sign on his fence said, "Criminals are made, not born." Maybe he believed that absolved him of something. It didn't. The children of Bath, Michigan deserved to go home that day. They didn't get to. And the most haunting detail of everything investigators found that day isn't the explosives, or the wired horses, or even his wife. It's that equipment sitting untouched in the barn. The answer to all of his problems that he never once considered using.